Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Okay, let's just dive right into this. Today, we're unpacking a chilling true story that's absolutely going to change the way you look at late night road trips. We're examining a terrifying sequence of events that happened to four friends on a desolate, freezing mountain pass. So get ready, because this isn't just your standard campfire tale. It's a documented, fascinating look at grief, survival, and the completely unexplainable forces that are just waiting for us in the dark. So picture this. Have you ever lost your way on an unknown mountain road in the dead of night? Just imagine the visceral terror of that for a second. The pitch black, the biting cold, that creeping, sinking feeling that you aren't completely alone out there. Well, that is exactly what happened to Sahil and his three friends, Chirag, Arun, and Samai. They took a trip up to the mountains to escape reality, but as you'll see, they ended up driving straight into a living nightmare. All right, let's get into Section 1, Valley of Death, Rothang. To understand how things went so horribly wrong, we first really need to understand the geography and the history of where Sahil, Chirag, Arun, and Samay went. The setting is the infamous Rohtang Pass. And get this, in local folklore, the word Rohtang literally translates to Valley of Death, or a pile of corpses. Yikes, right? For centuries, people who tried to cross this high-altitude pass at night would be found dead the very next morning down in the valley. Now, authorities always blame the extreme cold or, accidental falls from the really treacherous cliffs. But the locals, they absolutely knew better. They firmly believed that a shape-shifting, dark entity roamed these roads the second the sun went down. Now, outsiders often make that classic mistake of ignoring local rules. Before the group left their hotel, the receptionist gave them some very specific, dire warnings. A strict curfew, meaning tourists literally must return before 6 p.m., a lockdown where locals lock their doors at dusk. He warned them all about this legend of a shape-shifting entity and how the deaths up there are always covered up. So, what did Sahil and his friends do? They completely arrogantly laughed it off. They figured it was just some fake story meant to scare tourists, and they headed up the mountain totally unbothered. But there was this hidden vulnerability in their group that was about to be exploited. A psychological target. Samai, one of the four friends, was highly vulnerable. Just 3 or 4 months before this trip, his younger brother tragically died in an accident during a school trip. Samai, who used to be the life of every single party, was completely shattered and quietly grieving. And as we're going to see, the darkness on that mountain doesn't just attack randomly. It preys on emotional weakness. Samai was the absolute perfect prey. Moving on to Section 2, the 28-kilometer mystery. So after a few hours of enjoying the peak, darkness started to fall and a heavy, blinding fog quickly rolled in. This is where their scenic little drive turned into a claustrophobic trap. The escalation of terror from here is so rapid. At 5:15 p.m., they started their descent in that heavy fog. By 9 p.m., they were completely stranded in pitch darkness, forced to drive at a crawling 30 kilometers per hour. By 11 p.m., this terrifying realization set in. No matter how far they drove, they were trapped in a cyclical 28-kilometer loop. They wouldn't actually reach the safety of their Manali hotel until almost 2 a.m. Let's break down exactly what happened during those agonizing missing hours.
As they were driving at a total crawl, they passed a milestone that read Manali 28 km. Sitting on it was a man in a simple white dhoti. Okay, 20 minutes later, driving perfectly straight, they passed the exact same milestone. But this time, everyone saw something different. Sahil saw the man in the white dhoti again. Chirag claimed he saw a little girl holding a toy. And Arun, who was driving, saw a massive black horse staring directly at their car. When they passed that identical milestone for a third time, it was completely empty. This entity was a shape-shifting illusion, literally manipulating their individual perceptions to induce panic.
While the other three were panicking and arguing about what they were seeing, Samai's reaction was chillingly blank. Completely devoid of emotion, he just kept repeating, "Someone needs our help. If someone asks for help, we should stop." The dark entity was already beginning to seep into his mind, quietly probing for that deep grief. That brings us to Section 3, Shadow Running with Car. Just picture the suffocating fog, the pitch-black night, and the sheer panic vibrating inside that car as they realized something was out there with them. Arun suddenly yelled for everyone to keep their eyes facing forward. Do not look outside. Because just outside the window, there was a shadow. 40. That's 40 kilometers per hour. That is the exact speed their car was moving down the mountain. And right beside their windows, effortlessly keeping pace with them, was a 15-year-old boy. He wasn't running, guys. He was just casually walking. His clothes were covered in mud, and his face was battered with deep bruises. Arun frantically screamed, begging everyone not to look outside. He violently mashed the buttons to engage the car's central locking system, but the electronics completely failed. They were totally dead. In that exact moment of extreme vulnerability, Samai slowly rolled down his window. He turned his head and locked eyes directly with the bruised spirit of the dead boy walking right beside them. To break the trance, the friends started violently screaming Samai's name, doing absolutely everything they could to snap him out of it. And miraculously, it seemed to break the connection. The boy stopped walking and fell behind the car into the fog. But as Sahil looked in the rearview mirror, he saw the boy standing motionless in the road, waving at them. And horrifyingly, Samai was looking in the mirror, smiling back and waving in response. Arun immediately floored the gas. They sped up, finally broke the loop, found a milestone reading Manali 16 km, and frantically drove until they reached their hotel just before 2 a.m.
Section 4. Creepy Lullaby and Spirits. Exhausted and completely traumatized, they reached their hotel, locked the door, agreed they'd talk about it in the morning, and just tried to sleep. But at 3:30 a.m., they realized the true horror had actually followed them inside. Sahil was jolted awake in the dead of night by a voice. He looked across the room and saw Samay standing in front of the mirror, staring deeply into his own reflection, singing a childhood lullaby. You are my moon, you are my sun, you are the star of my eyes, you are alive. Now, normally, that's a sweet, comforting childhood lullaby, but in this hushed, dark hotel room, coming out of Samay's mouth, it was pure menace.
Sahil immediately woke up Arun and Chirag, and what they saw clearly showed Samay was no longer in control of his own body. He had these blood-red eyes completely fixated on the mirror. There were deep, physical marks on his neck, as if invisible hands were choking him from both sides. But honestly, the most unsettling part? He wore this bizarre, innocent, childlike smile and completely ignored the frantic screams of his best friends standing right behind him. Paralyzed with fear, they watched as Samay slowly turned his head. With that completely innocent smile, he whispered, "If I knock on your window at night, you will open it and help me, right?" The absolute second those words left his mouth, he collapsed unconscious under the floor. Which leads us into Section 5, Tantric Cure and Terrifying Truths. When morning finally broke, the friends knew modern medicine could not fix this. Taking the receptionist's earlier advice to heart, they rushed the unconscious Samay to a local pundit, a spiritual healer, who revealed the true psychological tragedy of the haunting. The dark entity from the mountain hadn't just attacked him physically, it had psychologically manipulated him. It perfectly mimicked the spirit of Samay's recently deceased younger brother just to bypass his mental defenses. It specifically weaponized Samay's profound grief against him, using a face he desperately missed to trick him into letting the entity in. The pundit immediately initiated a really intense 4-step exorcism process to save Samay's life. Step 1 was Nazar Utarna, which is a ritual to ward off the evil eye. Step 2 involved traditional spiritual cleansing known as Jadfuk. Step 3 was a series of intense protective prayers, or puja. Finally, in Step 4, the entity was forcefully expelled. The physical manifestation of this was violent. Samay began vomiting heavily, expelling this thick, bizarre black liquid from his body. Thankfully, today, Samay's completely back to normal. But Sahil notes that he is still plagued by nightmares, constantly waking up to the phantom sound of that creepy lullaby. And that brings us to the end of our explainer today, leaving us with a deeply unsettling thought. Does that shadow still wander the dark, freezing curves of the Rotang Pass, just waiting for someone to stop and help? So next time you're driving on a deserted mountain road at night and you see someone asking for help, you might just want to keep your windows rolled up and keep driving. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Stay safe out there and keep your curiosity alive.